The great chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as the massive doors slid open with a hiss that echoed through the curved walls. Ambassador Valith stood near his seat at the central podium and watched with her silver eyes as a figure walked slowly into the room. The figure moved with the heavy steps of someone who carried a great burden on his shoulders. It was High Commander Zorath of the Varix Dominion, and something was very wrong. Valith had met Zorath many times before at council gatherings and diplomatic events. He was always proud and strong, his green scales shining with the confidence of a warrior who had never tasted defeat. The Variks were conquerors by nature, and Zorath was their greatest military leader. But the creature that walked into the chamber today was not the same Zorath she remembered. His scales had gone pale and gray. His powerful tail dragged behind him instead of swinging with its usual aggressive energy. His yellow eyes, once burning with predator fire, now looked empty and haunted like the eyes of someone who had seen something terrible. The other council members began to whisper among themselves as Zorath took his place at the speaker's platform in the center of the room. There were over 200 delegates from different species, and they all sensed that something significant had happened. Councilor Murith, an ancient being made of pure thought energy who had lived for 10,000 years, pulsed with a soft blue light that indicated concern. The old entity had seen many things in its long existence, but it had never seen a Varix commander look so broken. "High Commander Zorath," Ambassador Valith said in her calm and measured voice, "you requested an emergency session of the full council. This is highly unusual, as your reports typically come through standard communication channels. What has happened that requires your physical presence here?" Zorath stood silent for a long moment, and the chamber grew so quiet that the delegates could hear the soft hum of the environmental systems, keeping the room at a comfortable temperature for all the different species present. When Zorath finally spoke, his voice was rough and tired. 16 planetary rotations ago, I stood in this very chamber and announced the beginning of our conquest of Earth, he said slowly, each word seeming to cost him great effort. Many of you were present that day. You heard my confidence. You saw the strength of my fleet on the display screens. You watched as we departed for the small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. He paused and looked around the room at the assembled delegates. I told you that the conquest would be simple, he continued. I told you that the humans were primitives with no real technology. I told you that they fought among themselves constantly and would fall apart at the first sign of a superior enemy. I promised you that Earth would belong to the Varix Dominion within one lunar cycle. Ambassador Valith leaned forward in her seat. She remembered that day very well. The Council had not objected to the Varix invasion because humanity was so young and weak. They had barely managed to put a few small stations in orbit around their own planet. They had no interstellar ships, no energy weapons, no force shields. It seemed like such an easy target. You said the conquest would take 16 days, Valith said carefully. That time has now passed. Are you here to report your success, High Commander? A strange sound escaped from Zorath's throat, and it took the delegates a moment to realize that the proud Varix warrior was laughing. But it was not a happy laugh. It was the dark and bitter laugh of someone who had lost everything. Success? Zorath repeated the word as if it tasted bad in his mouth. Ambassador, I am here to tell you that the Varix Dominion no longer exists as a military power. Our fleet is destroyed. Our warriors are dead. Our reputation as conquerors is finished forever. Gasps and shouts of disbelief erupted throughout the chamber. The Variks were one of the most powerful military forces in the known galaxy. They had conquered 47 worlds over the past 3 centuries. Their soldiers were trained from birth to fight and kill. Their ships were armed with the most advanced weapons technology available. How could they possibly have been defeated by a primitive species that still used combustion engines and chemical rockets? Counselor Mirith pulsed with a bright orange light that indicated shock and confusion. "High Commander, please explain," the ancient entity said in its resonating telepathic voice that all species could understand. "Our records indicate that Earth's dominant species possesses no technology capable of threatening a Varrics invasion force. They have no plasma weapons, no orbital defense systems, no faster-than-light capabilities. How could they have defeated you?" Zorath's yellow eyes finally showed something other than emptiness. For just a moment, they showed fear. "Because we made a terrible mistake, Counselor," he said quietly. "We looked at the humans and saw what they did not have. We counted their weapons and measured their ships and calculated their military strength. We did all the things we always do before a conquest, and every calculation told us that victory was certain." He slammed his clawed fist against the speaker's podium, making several nearby delegates jump in surprise. "But we forgot to ask the most important question," he growled. "We forgot to ask what the humans actually were. We forgot to look at their history. We forgot to study their nature. We saw a young species with primitive technology, and we assumed they would be easy prey." He looked directly at Ambassador Valeth, and his next words sent a chill through every being in the chamber. "We were not the hunters, Ambassador. We were never the hunters. From the moment we entered their star system, we were the prey. We just did not know it yet." The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates shouted questions and demanded explanations, but Zorath simply stood at the podium and waited for silence to return. When it finally did, Ambassador Valeth asked the question that everyone was thinking. "High Commander Zorath, what happened on Earth?" Zorath reached for the control panel on the podium and activated the holographic display system. The lights in the chamber dimmed as images began to appear in the air above him. "I am going to show you," he said grimly. "I am going to show you what humanity really is. And when I am finished, you will understand why I came here in person. You will understand why I needed to look into your eyes when I deliver my warning." He took a deep breath. "Pay attention, Council members. Your survival may depend on what you learn today." The holographic display flickered to life above the podium, and the assembled Council members watched as images of Earth appeared before them. The small blue planet hung in the darkness of space, looking peaceful and beautiful with its white clouds and green continents and vast blue oceans. It was hard to believe that this quiet world had somehow destroyed the mighty Varrics dominion. High Commander Zorath began his report, his voice flat and tired as he narrated the events of the invasion. "We arrived in the Earth system with 300 warships," he said, as the display showed the Varrics fleet emerging from faster-than-light travel. "It was more than enough firepower to conquer a dozen worlds, but I wanted to be certain of quick victory. I did not want the conquest to drag on for months." The display showed the fleet approaching Earth, and then the bombardment began. Varrics plasma cannons rained fire down upon the planet's surface, targeting military bases and government buildings and communication centers. Within hours, every major city had been struck. "The humans tried to fight back," Zorath continued. "They launched their primitive missiles and sent their aircraft against us. Some of them even detonated nuclear weapons in our path. But our shields held, and their attacks did nothing. The Council watched as human military forces crumbled under the Varrics' assault. Tanks exploded into flames, fighter jets fell from the sky, and soldiers scattered in panic as the invaders descended upon them. By the end of the first day, we had destroyed every significant military target on the planet," Zorath said. "We had captured their leaders and shut down their communications. We had landed our ground forces in every major population center. The conquest appeared to be complete." Ambassador Valeth nodded slowly. This was standard Varrics procedure, and it had worked perfectly on 47 other worlds. Overwhelming force, rapid destruction of military capability, capture of leadership. It was a proven strategy. We established control hubs in each major city, Zorth continued. We began the process of organizing the human population for labor assignments. Some would work in mines, others in factories. A few would be kept for breeding purposes to maintain the workforce. It was the same system we had used on every conquered world. The display showed Varric soldiers herding groups of humans into processing centers. The aliens towered over their captives, their green scales gleaming and their weapons ready to punish any resistance. We expected the humans to submit, Zorth said, and his voice grew darker. Every other species we have conquered accepted their fate once their military was destroyed and their leaders were captured. They understood that resistance was pointless. They chose to survive. They looked up at the council with those haunted yellow eyes. But the humans did not submit. They did not accept. And on the third day, everything changed. The holographic display shifted to show a mountain road in a region the humans called Afghanistan. A convoy of Varric supply vehicles was moving through a narrow pass when suddenly explosions erupted from both sides of the road. The council watched in silence as the convoy was torn apart. Rocks crashed down from the cliffs above, blocking the road. Small figures emerged from hidden positions and attacked the surviving Varric soldiers with captured weapons and improvised explosives. This was not an isolated incident, Zorth said, as the display began showing similar attacks from around the planet. On the same day, at the same hour, 17 of our supply convoys were ambushed in 17 different locations. The attacks were coordinated across multiple continents. Council Amirith pulsed with confusion. How is that possible? The ancient entity asked. You said their communications were destroyed. How could they coordinate attacks across such vast distances? Zorth shook his head slowly. We do not know. They used methods we did not understand. Runners carrying messages through the wilderness. Signal fires visible from hilltops. Drums beating in patterns that meant nothing to us but carried information for them. They had backup systems for their backup systems, ways of communicating that did not require any technology at all. The display showed more attacks, and the council noticed something disturbing about the human attackers. They were not soldiers. An elderly woman swung a heavy farming tool at a Varric's warrior. A teenager threw a bottle filled with burning liquid. A man in a business suit fired a captured plasma rifle with deadly accuracy. A group of children ran through the chaos, carrying ammunition and supplies to the adult fighters. We had classified these humans as non-combatants, Zorth said bitterly. We had marked them as harmless workers to be processed and assigned to labor details. We did not understand that every human, regardless of age or occupation or physical condition, was capable of becoming a warrior. Ambassador Valeth felt a cold sensation spreading through her body. This was wrong, all wrong. Conquered species did not behave this way. On the fifth day, we lost an entire battalion, Zorth continued, and his voice shook slightly. 300 of my finest warriors, equipped with the best weapons and armor we possessed, were sent to secure a building the humans called a hospital. The display showed a large white structure with a red cross symbol on its roof. According to human customs, this symbol meant the building was used to heal the sick and injured. It should have contained only the wounded and the dying, people too weak to pose any threat. When my soldiers entered the building, they found the patients waiting for them, Zorth said. The sick, the elderly, the dying. They should have been helpless. They should have surrendered immediately. The display showed what happened next, and several council members turned away in horror. Humans in hospital beds rose up and attacked the Varric soldiers with whatever they could find. Scalpels, scissors, metal poles from 4 stands, pieces of broken furniture. Some of them could barely walk, but they threw themselves at the invaders with a ferocity that defied all logic. In the center of the carnage, an elderly human female stood over the body of a Varric's warrior. She was 83 years old according to their records, frail and thin and suffering from a disease that would kill her within months anyway. She held a bloody metal pole in her trembling hands, and 11 dead Variks lay around her. She was smiling, Zorath whispered. With her last breath, she was smiling. We had to shoot her 14 times before she finally stopped moving. The council chamber was completely silent. Councilor Mareth finally spoke, its telepathic voice heavy with disbelief. High Commander, are you telling us that a single dying human female killed 11 of your trained warriors? Yes, Zorath replied simply. And she was not unique. She was ordinary. She was just one of billions of humans who refused to accept defeat, who chose to fight even when fighting was hopeless, who preferred death over surrender. He looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. That was when I began to understand our mistake, he said. We had invaded a world of warriors. Every human, young or old, sick or healthy, was born with the capacity for violence. They had been fighting each other for 10,000 years, killing millions of their own kind in wars over territory and resources and beliefs. We thought this made them weak and divided. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. We were wrong. It made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. And we had just given them a reason to stop fighting each other and start fighting together. The Galactic Council sat in stunned silence as High Commander Zorath continued his terrible report. The holographic display showed image after image of human resistance, and each one was more disturbing than the last. The delegates watched with growing horror as they began to understand what kind of species lived on that small blue world. On day 7, we lost Commander Vexeth, Zorath said. He was one of my best officers, a veteran of 30 planetary conquests. He was killed by a single human in a region they called Ukraine. The display showed a destroyed building in a ruined city. Variks soldiers were searching through the rubble for survivors when one of them spotted movement beneath a pile of broken concrete and twisted metal. The human had been buried alive when we bombed the building 6 days earlier, Zorath explained. 6 days with no food, almost no water, and barely enough air to breathe. Any other species would have died within hours, but this human survived. The council watched as the buried human was dug out of the rubble. He was thin and pale and covered in dust and blood. He could barely stand. He should have been grateful to be rescued. Instead, he attacked. The human threw himself at Commander Vexeth with a broken piece of metal in his hand. He moved so fast that the Variks soldiers barely had time to react. He stabbed the commander through the gap in his armor, hitting the vital organs beneath, and Vexeth fell dead before anyone could save him. The human had been waiting, Zorath said quietly. He had survived for 6 days on drops of rainwater that leaked through the rubble. He had kept himself alive through pure will, just so he could have a chance to kill one of us. When we finally dug him out, he was ready. Ambassador Valith shook her head in disbelief. That is not possible, she said. No species can survive such conditions for so long. The body would shut down. The mind would break. That is what we thought as well, Zorath replied. But we were wrong. Humans are not like other species. Their bodies can endure incredible damage and keep functioning. Their minds can push through pain and fear and exhaustion that would destroy anyone else. He pulled up new data on the display, showing biological information about the human species. Their ancestors were persistent predators, he explained. They did not kill their prey with speed or strength. Instead, they chased their prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal was too exhausted to run anymore. They evolved to never give up, to never stop, to keep going when every other creature would have collapsed. The display showed human soldiers marching through snow and sand and jungle, carrying heavy equipment, walking for days without rest. It showed human athletes running distances that would kill most other species. It showed human survivors of disasters continuing to function despite injuries that should have been fatal. And that is not all, Zorth continued. When humans are threatened, their bodies produce chemicals that suppress pain and increase aggression. They call this the fight or flight response, but in truth, humans almost always choose to fight. Counselor Merith pulsed with a deep red color that indicated alarm. You are describing a species designed for combat, the ancient entity said. A species that evolution has optimized for violence and survival. Yes, Zorth agreed. And we gave them something they had not had for centuries. We gave them a common enemy. We united them against us. The display shifted to show events from day 9 of the invasion, and several council members gasped at what they saw. A group of humans had deliberately infected themselves with a deadly disease, a pathogen that spread quickly and killed within hours. They had then walked into a Varix base and surrendered, asking to be taken prisoner. We did not understand what they were doing, Zorth said. We processed them and put them in holding cells with our soldiers. Within 3 days, half the base was dead. The humans had turned themselves into living weapons. They killed themselves to kill you? Ambassador Valith asked, her silver eyes wide with shock. They sacrificed themselves, Zorth corrected. There is a difference. They knew they were going to die, but they chose to make their deaths count. They called it a sacrifice play. It is a concept that appears throughout their history. The display showed more examples of human sacrifice, and the council watched in horrified fascination. Soldiers throwing themselves on explosive devices to save their companions. Parents walking through plasma fire to reach their children. Pilots crashing their aircraft into enemy targets rather than ejecting to safety. Ordinary civilians standing in front of weapons to protect strangers. Humans form bonds with each other that transcend logic, Zorth explained. They call it love or loyalty or duty. Whatever name they give it, the result is the same. They will die for each other without hesitation, and they will kill for each other without mercy. He paused and took a deep breath before continuing. On day 12, we made our greatest mistake. We tried to use their children against them. The display showed Varix soldiers rounding up human children and taking them to a fortified base. The plan was simple. Announced that the children would be killed unless the adults stopped fighting and surrendered. It was a tactic that had worked on other species. We broadcast our demands to the surrounding area, Zorth said. We gave them 6 hours to lay down their weapons and submit. We thought the threat to their young would break their will. He shook his head slowly. Instead, it drove them into a frenzy. Within 2 hours, every human in a 100-mile radius was marching toward our base. They came with guns and knives and farming tools and their bare hands. They came knowing they would die. They came anyway. The display showed the attack, and it was like nothing the council had ever seen. Humans charged directly into plasma fire, their bodies falling but others climbing over them to keep advancing. Parents ran toward the base with weapons in one hand and pictures of their children in the other. Even the wounded kept fighting, dragging themselves forward with their last breath. We killed thousands of them, Zorth said, his voice hollow. We fired until our weapons overheated. We called in orbital strikes. We did everything we could to stop them. It did not matter. The display showed humans breaching the walls of the base, swarming over the Varix defenders, fighting with a fury that seemed almost supernatural. They recovered every child, Zorth said, and they killed every Varix soldier in the base. 5,000 of our warriors, dead in a single night. And the humans did not stop there. He looked up at the council with eyes full of haunted memory. They found the officer who had ordered the children taken. They found him hiding in a supply closet. And what they did to him took a very long time. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, Ambassador Valeth spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "High Commander, how many warriors did you lose in total?" Zorath's answer made several delegates cry out in disbelief. "All of them," he said simply. 30,000 Varix warriors, the finest fighting force in 3 sectors. Every single one is dead. I am the only survivor, and that is only because I was aboard a ship in orbit when the end came." He gestured at the display one final time. "We came to conquer Earth. Instead, we woke something that had spent 10,000 years conquering itself. And now that thing is awake, and it is very, very angry." The holographic display now showed Earth from high orbit, and the council members leaned forward to see the current state of the planet. What they saw made their blood run cold. The Varix invasion fleet was gone, destroyed or captured. Only a handful of damaged ships remained, hiding behind the planet's moon. On the surface below, the signs of battle were everywhere, but the fires were dying down. The war was over. Humanity had won. "This is the current situation," High Commander Zorath said, his voice heavy with defeat. "Our ground forces have been completely eliminated. Our fleet has been destroyed. The handful of survivors who managed to escape are scattered across the system, hiding from human patrols." Ambassador Valeth studied the display with growing concern. She could see lights flickering across the planet's surface, bright points of activity that had not been there before the invasion. "What are those lights?" she asked, pointing at the display. Zorath's expression grew even darker. "Those are construction sites," he said. "Factories, shipyards, research facilities. The humans are building, Ambassador. They are building faster than we ever thought possible." He adjusted the display to show a closer view of one of the construction sites. The council watched in amazement as thousands of humans worked together with incredible efficiency. They were using captured Varix equipment alongside their own machines, combining technologies in ways that should not have worked. Massive structures rose from the ground at speeds that defied belief. "They are not building homes or hospitals," Zorath said grimly. "They are building weapons. They are building ships. They are building a war machine unlike anything this galaxy has ever seen." Councilor Merith pulsed with alarm. "How is this possible?" the ancient entity asked. "They did not possess this level of industrial capability before your invasion. Our records show they could barely cooperate long enough to build simple space stations. The invasion changed them," Zorath explained. "Before we came, they were divided into hundreds of separate nations that competed and fought with each other. They wasted enormous resources on internal conflicts and political disputes. They could not agree on anything." He paused and looked around the chamber. "But when we attacked, something happened that we did not expect. They stopped fighting each other. Every nation, every faction, every political group put aside their differences and joined together. They call it the Coalition, and it speaks with one voice for the entire human species." The display showed images of human leaders from different countries, standing together on a single platform. They were signing documents and shaking hands and making speeches about unity and revenge. Flags from every nation hung side by side, united under a new symbol that showed a clenched human fist reaching toward the stars. "This unity has made them incredibly dangerous," Zorath continued. "Resources that were once wasted on internal conflicts are now being directed toward a single purpose. Scientists who used to work in competition are now working together. Factories that once produced consumer goods are now producing weapons." He pulled up new data showing production numbers, and the council gasped at what they saw. In just 16 days, the humans had built over 200 new aircraft. They had constructed dozens of orbital platforms. They had repaired and upgraded their existing space vessels. And they had begun construction on something much larger. "They are building warships," Zorath said. Not exploration vessels, not cargo haulers, but dedicated military ships designed for combat. Our intelligence suggests they're using a combination of human engineering and captured Varric's technology. Ambassador Valeth felt a chill run down her spine. They are reverse engineering your weapons? They are improving them, Zorath replied bitterly. We captured one of their research facilities before we lost the ground war. They had taken our plasma rifles apart and rebuilt them with human modifications. The new weapons fire 30% faster and 20% hotter than our original designs. The chamber erupted into worried murmurs. That is impossible, one delegate shouted. It took our scientists 300 years to optimize plasma compression technology. They cannot have improved upon it in just 11 days. And yet they have, Zorath said simply. Human minds work differently than ours. They make intuitive leaps that bypass logical processes. They try things that should not work, and sometimes those things work anyway. They call it human ingenuity, and it is terrifying. He adjusted the display again, showing intercepted human communications. They are not just building weapons, he said. They are sharing everything they learn. Every scientific discovery, every technological improvement, every tactical innovation is instantly transmitted to every human on the planet. Their entire species is learning together, growing stronger together, preparing together. Councilor Mareth's form flickered with what might have been fear. Preparing for what? Zorath looked directly at the ancient entity. For war, he said. For galactic war. They know about the Council now. They know about the other species out there. They know that we allowed this invasion to happen without interference. And they are very, very angry about it. The display showed a recording from a human broadcast station. A woman with dark skin and fierce eyes was speaking to a massive crowd of humans gathered in a ruined city square. The aliens who invaded our world did not act alone, she was saying. There is a Galactic Council out there, hundreds of species who watched as we were attacked, who did nothing to help us, who saw us as too primitive to deserve protection. The crowd roared with anger, and the sound was terrible to hear. We were divided before, the woman continued. We were weak because we fought among ourselves. But now we are united. Now we are strong. Now we remember what we are. We are the species that conquered fire and split the atom and walked on the moon. We are the species that survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. We are the species that refuses to die. The crowd chanted something in unison, and the translation system rendered it as one terrible word. Revenge. They are coming for us, Zorath said as the recording ended. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. They are building their fleet. They are training their soldiers. They are developing new weapons. And when they are ready, they will leave their planet and come looking for every species that did not help them. He pointed at the assembled delegates. That includes all of you. Every member of this council who sat by and watched as the Varrics invaded their world. Every species that knew what was happening and did nothing to stop it. The humans have not forgotten. The humans will never forget. Ambassador Valeth rose from her seat, her silver face pale with fear. How long do we have? Zorath shook his head slowly. I do not know. Our estimates suggest they could have a functional interstellar fleet within 5 of their years. Maybe less. They are working around the clock, every human on the planet contributing something to the effort. They have turned their entire civilization into a war machine. He paused and looked at the display one final time, at the image of that small blue world that had destroyed his people. And they are singing while they work. They are singing songs about Earth and humanity, and what they are going to do to the galaxy. They are happy, council members. For the first time in their history, they are completely united and completely happy. His voice dropped to a whisper, because they finally have a purpose that every human can agree on. They finally have an enemy they can all hate together. And that enemy is us. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates from 100 different species shouted over each other, their voices mixing into a wall of noise that echoed off the curved walls. Some were demanding immediate action against Earth. Others were calling for peace negotiations. And a few were already calculating how quickly they could evacuate their home systems. Ambassador Valeth rose from her seat and held up her hands for silence, but nobody paid attention. The fear in the room was too strong. The delegates had just learned that a new predator had been awakened in the galaxy, and they did not know what to do about it. Only High Commander Zorth remained calm, standing at the speaker's podium with that empty expression on his pale green face. He had already processed his fear. He had already accepted what was coming. Now he was simply waiting to deliver his final message. Eventually, the shouting died down as the delegates ran out of things to say. One by one, they turned back to look at the broken Varric's commander, waiting for him to continue. Zorth nodded slowly, as if this was exactly what he had expected. "I know what you are thinking," he said. "You are thinking about how to stop them. You are thinking about alliances and fleets and weapons that might be powerful enough to defeat humanity before they become too strong." He shook his head. "Do not bother. It is already too late." Counselor Merith pulsed with confusion. "Explain yourself, High Commander." "Humanity does not yet possess interstellar travel. We have time to prepare." "You are thinking like conquerors," Zorth replied. "You are thinking in terms of military force and territorial control. But the humans do not think that way. They think in terms of survival and adaptation and endless, relentless persistence." He adjusted the holographic display one more time, and a new image appeared. It showed a human woman standing in the ruins of what had once been a Varric's command center. She had dark skin and close-cropped hair and eyes that burned with an intensity that made several delegates look away. She was wearing a uniform of some kind, simple and practical, and she carried herself like someone who had seen terrible things and was not afraid to see more. This message was transmitted to every surviving Varric's vessel before we retreated from the Earth system, Zora said. The humans wanted to make sure we heard it. They wanted to make sure we understood. He pressed a control, and the woman began to speak. "To the Galactic Council," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We know you are watching. We know you have been watching since the beginning. We know you allowed this invasion to happen. We know you looked at our world and saw something weak and primitive. We know you did nothing to help us." The chamber was absolutely silent. "We want you to know that we are grateful," the woman continued, and a cold smile crossed her face. "Before the Varric's came, we were divided. We wasted our strength fighting each other over borders and resources and ideas. We forgot what we were capable of. We forgot what it meant to be human." She stepped closer to the recording device, and her eyes seemed to look directly into the souls of every delegate in the chamber. "The Varric's reminded us. They came to our world with their ships and their weapons and their arrogance, and they showed us what the galaxy really is. They showed us that we are not alone, that there are other species out there, that some of them want to hurt us and enslave us and take everything we have built." Her smile grew wider and colder. "So we remembered. We remembered the ice ages we survived. We remembered the predators we hunted to extinction. We remembered the diseases we conquered, and the mountains we crossed, and the oceans we sailed. We remembered 10,000 years of war and struggle, and never, ever giving up." She spread her arms wide, and behind her, the council could see thousands of humans working on construction projects, building the weapons and ships that would one day carry them to the stars. "We are united now," she said. "For the first time in our history, every human being speaks with one voice. We have no more divisions, no more conflicts, no more wasted potential. We have taken all the energy we used to spend fighting each other and pointed it at the sky." Her expression hardened into something fierce and terrible. "We are not going to hide on our little blue world anymore. We are not going to wait for the next invasion. We are coming out there, into your galaxy, into your space, into your homes. And when we arrive, we are going to find every species that looked at humanity and saw victims." She leaned even closer to the recording device. "We are going to find every empire that thought we were beneath them. We are going to find every civilization that watched our children die and did nothing to stop it. And we are going to ask them one simple question." Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. "Did you choose to invade Earth?" The recording ended and the holographic display went dark. The council sat in stunned silence, unable to speak, unable to move. The message was clear. Humanity was coming, and they were not coming in peace. High Commander Zorath turned away from the podium and began walking toward the chamber exit. His part was done. He had delivered his warning. Now the council would have to decide what to do with it. At the threshold of doors, he paused and looked back at the assembled delegates. "The Varric's Dominion ruled 47 worlds," he said quietly. "We were the most feared military power in 3 sectors. Our warriors were trained from birth to kill. Our ships were the deadliest in known space. We had never lost a war in 300 years of conquest." He shook his head slowly. "And we were destroyed in 16 days by a species that had not yet invented faster than light travel. We were killed by farmers and teachers and children. We were hunted through the streets of cities we thought we had conquered. We were broken by a force we did not understand and could not stop." He looked around the chamber one final time, his yellow eyes meeting the terrified gazes of the delegates. "I looked into their eyes," he said. "I saw what lives behind them. I saw the thing that has kept them alive through every disaster their planet could throw at them. I saw the predator that conquered fire and split the atom and walked on the moon. I saw 10,000 years of war and struggle and survival." His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "And I am telling you now, with complete certainty, that there is no force in this galaxy that can stop them. There is no weapon that will make them surrender. There is no threat that will make them afraid. They will keep coming and coming and coming until they have answered their question for every species in the cosmos." He turned back toward the doors. "Pray that the humans find mercy, council members. Pray that they decide to forgive. Pray that when they arrive at your worlds, they remember something in themselves other than vengeance." He stepped through the doorway. "Because I looked into their eyes, and I promise you this. Mercy is not their nature." The doors slid shut behind him, and High Commander Zorath was gone. The council chamber remained silent for a long, long time. The delegates sat in their seats, unable to speak, unable to process what they had just learned. The galaxy had changed, and nothing would ever be the same. Finally, Ambassador Valith broke the silence. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nobody had an answer. The holographic display flickered back to life, showing that last frozen image of the human woman. Her eyes burned with a promise that would haunt the Council's nightmares for years to come. She was the face of humanity now, the face of a species awakened, a species united, a species coming for revenge. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, a small blue world was preparing for war. And the galaxy trembled